Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on when you're listening to this. Welcome to the Victory Podcast, and I'm your host, Monique Watson. On this episode, I got to sit down with my friend, Pastor Alicia Partee. She's a pastor, she's a therapist, she's now a writer. She talks a bit about her book, her time abroad, and a little bit about her career in general. So take a listen, and I hope you enjoy it. So, welcome to the Victory Podcast. I'm your host, Monique Watson, and I have the wonderful pleasure to interview one of my friends, an amazing human being, amazing minister, amazing therapist, amazing everything, Pastor Alicia Partee. How are you?
I'm good. It's so good to be here. Good to see you.
Good to see you too.
Yeah.
So welcome to the podcast. And for our listeners, you're new to the pod, but not new to my life. So maybe give your a brief introduction
Mhm.
on who are you, who's Alicia Partee, and how we know each other.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Alicia, and as she said, and I met Monique at Maranatha Christian Center, where I'm the executive pastor. Um, After working in tech and transitioning into mental health, and then as a pastor, I actually married a pastor who took a job in Norway, and I lived abroad for about 8 years and then came back to help transition the church where I met Monique. And when I came back, COVID happened. My husband came over, was stuck here, was called to Maranatha, offered a job at Maranatha, and here we are back in the States. And I had the pleasure of, since I came in December 2019 until you moved, to get to know you and work with you and meet your husband and your lovely sister, and become friends. And we even had wonderful times. We went to see Hamilton. That was it right there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Dinner in Hamilton just took the relationship to another level.
Oh yeah, for sure, for sure. So you mentioned a little bit in your intro there, a bit about your background. How did you, maybe you can talk a little bit about, that's a lot of different
Yes.
aspects and history that you've gone through. Maybe we can talk a little bit about that, and then we'll get into, just to give an outline for folks, we'll talk a little bit more about Pastor Alicia's background. Then we'll get into her book that just came out not too long ago, Authentigrate, kind of telling us a little bit about that. And we'll talk a bit as she's talking about these different aspects, wife, writer, minister, therapist, and how to balance all that, how, she's grown in those different areas, how to foster growth, tips for other people. And then we'll talk a little about some upcoming events, how to get the book, the companion courses that go into that. And then, of course, sharing her social media, as well as website and things like that. So yeah, a little bit more about that background. That's a lot to unpack around so much to who you are, right? So maybe you
Yes.
can tell us a bit more about that.
Absolutely. It really is. It's amazing. First of all, I have to tell you it's a God thing because nobody could make this type of story up, right?
Amen.
But yeah, but I started out, I worked at a Fortune 500 company. I took an early retirement. I think I started there like in 1989. Love what I did, climbed the corporate ladder pretty quickly. But, things were happening. I think it was right before .com, and so they were going to lay off and things. So they offered early retirement. So I took an early retirement, went into the .com business, which was wonderful, right? Working in telecommunications, I led teams, I led multilingual teams, just amazing opportunities to work. And the one thing I'll say is that, if even though I'm talking about this, what I'm showing is how God doesn't waste an experience, and how the same skills that He was developing in me and using at the Fortune 500 company are still skills that I'm leveraging today. So I want to say that. So I got burnt out. I ended up getting a divorce, actually. So busy climbing the ladder, going after stocks and all that stuff, doing .com. It was such an unhealthy time. It was fun, but it was unhealthy. Burnt out. And when I got a divorce, I went back to school. I went back to school just to study the Bible, just to unpack it, learn more about it. I had no idea where it was leading. I like to call God Jehovah Sneaky because I'm like, God, that was a setup. So here I am in theology school, studying the word, loving the word, going deeper. I couldn't get enough of it. And all of a sudden, doors open for doing Bible studies and speaking, and then one day becoming an administrative pastor. But that led to when I was in theology school, they had just started a program where of integrating your faith into theology, and it was a marriage and family therapist. And you would think, coming from a tech field, that that was the opposite of my personality, but again, God would have it because of evidence-based practices. You could measure it. So here is God just strategically building it, me just saying yes and willing to go that next step. I had one amazing boss that I worked Fortune 500 company, as well as when they started their startup. And she said to me, never worry about your title. Always do what you feel called to do. And so, even though I've had all these titles, it is really just God's journey for me to have this well rounded experience to do what I am doing today, because I need all of it to do what I'm doing. And so, that's how it came about. So, of course, finishing school, I became a licensed marriage, after you do your 3,000 hours, I became licensed in the state of California. I continued to remain a pastor, right? And I continue to leverage technology even today. So, yeah, that's kind of how I got here.
That's an amazing story. And a lot of it's interesting when you mention about, saying yes to things and the importance of that, and new experiences that can lead you into. And that really, I think, brings us into talking a bit about your book, Authentigrate, and this term authentication that you have helped to develop and kind of foster, and kind of what that looks like. It's a little bit different, and not a word that, I was putting in my outline in Word, and Microsoft Word dictionary was like, I don't know that word. It's a new terminology. So maybe you can tell us about that term and a little bit about your book that's just recently come out.
Absolutely. That term came out of the journey abroad. When I moved to Norway, I packed up my bags. I took so much time to make sure I knew where I was moving to, the type of clothes I needed, where I would shop, the type of food, what I should bring, because maybe they don't have in the country. But I never took stock of the human response to change and transition. And so while abroad, because no one ever talked about it, I mean, I read blogs, I listened to TED Talks. I was trying to be, I'm an over preparer anyway. So I was preparing for it. But I remember moving to the country, I wanted to fit in so bad. This is hindsight. I couldn't have told you this while I was going through it. I learned this. I was trying to fit in. I put on skis. I went to cabins without water, without running water, without lights, and an outdoor toilet. I did everything like a Norwegian. I wanted to fit in. I wanted to learn the language, and I wanted to, because remember well, you don't know, but when we moved, the goal was for my husband to retire there. We were going to retire in Europe. It wasn't an expat position. We were literally immigrants moved to that country, and it was supposed to be permanently. So of course I wanted to fit into society. And one morning I remember waking up asking myself, who am I? Because I did so much to assimilate, including the recommendation from a Norwegian friend to scale back my LinkedIn profile, because in Norway you usually have one career and it seems like I've had too many. And I got lost in that. So I woke up in the mirror and I'm like, well, who am I? Crying like, God, who am I here? How do I belong here? And he started a journey with me to find it was already inside of me, but he took me on a journey to find out who I would be in this new society, in this new place, in this new culture. And so, in me working with my mentor, an international mentor, Dr. Dana, who's absolutely amazing, when she was just talking to me, she says, I got it. It's you want to integrate, but you want to be authentic. And that's how Authentigrate and Authentication was born. And the goal really is to change the way we look at integration. When people move, I don't care if they're voluntary moving, whether they're expat, love path, whether they're following their spouse, or even if they're involuntarily moving as a refugee, we have something to bring to the table. We're, and a lot of times we're treated like we're not a whole person, but we are. And I want them, I want to see your the new culture. I want to learn and be a part of it, but I want you to see me, and I want to be authentically integrated into your society, which means I contribute, and together we can produce and innovate really great things. And that's how and why it was born. It was out of pain. And it was out of, I have to build something so that people that go, you know, I'm a forerunner anyway. That's what I do, right? In all my jobs, I've been a first at a lot of things. And I don't, if I can help people intentionally move to new countries and cultures, and not make it so, not necessarily painful, because I loved what I was doing, but challenging and overcome, you know, go into it intentionally. That's what this book is for.
But when you think about authenticating and authenticration in this book, what are kind of maybe one or two kind of take home things that people will pique their interest about the book and learning more? Even if, I read through your book and I found
Yeah.
it was also good, even if you're not in an expat situation, a bit of like self-discovery, how to really define and understand yourself. So maybe some good take homes there about the book.
That is so key what you're saying. So people who have read the book, what they're telling me, I had someone in another country read a book. She says, your book helped me in my new career. She says, she's work as a nurse. She says, I worked as a nurse at one company for so long, at one hospital, and now I'm at another hospital. And I couldn't understand, though it was a promotion and greater, I couldn't understand why I had some sadness. And she said she's seen herself in my book. This book is really about changes and transitions, which are not linear, right? A change happens, you get married, but your human response, your emotion, you still have to adjust to that. You know, maybe, whether you have a child, or maybe you're empty nest, whether you retire. So some of the same principles can help you actually get through life stage transitions. And I will do other books specific to that, but I do think it'll take you on a discovery of who you are, what your strengths are, what your passions, how do you intentionally navigate the shock models that come with change that we all have to experience. So I do believe that every human can find themselves in this book, because we all have some type of life stage change. And a change doesn't mean it's negative. Remember, moving to another country to me was absolutely exciting. Having a child is exciting. Going into retirement is exciting. But come on, isn't it scary too? What's your life going to be like on the other side? What are you going to experience? Again, we take care of, let's take retirement. We take care of, okay, our retirement accounts are okay, where we're going to live, how much we're going to live off of. But what about the emotional part? What about, oh my God, where do I belong? How do I fit? And how do I make the most of this stage of my life and still show up authentically in it? That's what it's about.
Absolutely. So, folks, if you haven't bought the book, go buy the book, read the book. It's really good. It's a quick read, so you're not going to spend eons reading it. You're not going to have to spend 6 months working through a huge textbook. And it's really realistic with some really great examples. I found a lot of the stories and examples were really helpful to kind of put it in a and taking some of the information and the skills and the advice that you give throughout the book, and then putting it in a tactical way to see how that kind of applies or how other people have gone through similar things.
Mhm.
um, so you're a writer now, officially. Woo, writer, doing well
Yes.
on Amazon. You're a minister, you're a wife, you're doing all these great things. How do you find that balance? Because I find that in talking with people, especially I find more so with women, but other people this can apply to too. But this that balance of especially when you're married too,
Yeah.
that balance of having support and being part of your spouse's life, and
Yes.
being that partner for them, being whatever you do professionally, whether
Yes.
that's multiple careers or a single thing or whatever. And then somewhere in between that balance of still doing things for yourself, like having that slice of the pie for yourself. Do you have any tips for folks?
I
Because you
do.
do a little bit of everything.
Yeah. So I have a word, I have a course too called Harmony, but it's so important. So when I want to address the spouse one first and just give a tip. One of the things my husband and I did a few years ago is we put in place, because I was so busy, especially trying to fit into a new country and culture. We said, if you need me, if you want me to do something and maybe I'm all busy and you say, honey, I need you, that I don't care what it was, I would stop and everything would go towards him. And not abuse that. I think since we've put it in place, we've been married like 14 years, almost 14 years now. I think he's used it maybe 2 to 3 times. And when I'll give an example, when I was in Norway, I had an important meeting scheduled. Oh my God, it was going to be the first meeting, and he says, I need you. I want you to be here." And I canceled it, and I lost a relationship because of that. But guess what? My marriage was still okay. And so I would say, have that phrase or that something. It doesn't have to be "I need you." It could be, something where he knows or she knows that no matter, you're first. And if you say it, I'm here. That helped. The second thing is, and you'll get this in the book Harmony. In the book Authentigrate, because there's another course at the end called Harmony that you get a little taste of. And I don't take you really into it. But one of the things that's super important is that I created a purpose statement, and I filter things out based on that. So I don't do everything. I do what God created me to do. So I understand who I am. I know my strengths. I know my talents. I know my purpose, my calling. And when things come about that don't align with that, I can say no. And I have to say, when you are doing what God created you to do, it feels so easy. Have you ever seen someone like decorate a cake and you're like, how do you do that? And they're like, that's nothing. It's because it's their gift. It's who they are. It's their call. So it's easy for them. And it doesn't take them much time, where if I tried to decorate a cake, it would probably take me a week and it couldn't eat it. And so it's so important that you unpack you, and that you know you, and that you literally and intentionally live your life on purpose. And that is also what Authentigrate is about.
Absolutely. So you mentioned you got some courses and things coming up. Harmony, I think, was a really interesting chapter to kind of unpack in the book and the pillars around there. So sounds like you got some more to dig into that coming up. Maybe you can tell folks about that and other events and classes and such.
Absolutely. So one event that's coming up on June 25th, Saturday, June 25th, it starts at 10 a.m. Pacific time, and it's free. And that's going to be a virtual book launch as well as a masterclass. And it's free, you guys. I'm going to delve a little deeper into what change and transition is and really give you practical. I got 3 fabulous speakers that's going to join me and help you level up yourself, your personal brand, all the documents that support you, from LinkedIn to your resume, as well as owning the leader within you. So if you can come to that, you definitely want to do it. You can find the link. I'm sure I'll give you the website in a little while. And after that, you'll hear more about the courses. One course we're going to do is Authentigrate. It's going to accompany the book. And then you could go into a longer course like Harmony. Of course, I do group coaching, one-on-one coaching, and things like that. So there's so many different ways and so many different levels that you can connect. And the biggest thing is, I definitely want to build a global companion community. So as you connect with me, you're going to be connect with other global movers, because we're in this together, and we want to build a tribe of people that is a support for one another, that can collaborate with one another, and that can help each other intentionally transition into new things.
Absolutely. That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. That was a lot of great information. I took note, and the link will be in the description for this podcast for the June 25th event, as well as your website. Any other ways that folks can get in contact with you, social media, anything like that you want to share with the folks on the call, on the podcast?
Absolutely. I am on Facebook under Alicia Partee. I'm also there under Authentigrate, as well as on Instagram under Authentigrate, LinkedIn, Alicia Partee. And of course, you can always email me at alicia@authentigrate.com.
Awesome. And of course, her contact info is in the description on this podcast. Thank you so much, Alicia, and really appreciate you taking time to join us this morning.
Yeah, you're amazing. I love what you're doing with Victory, and I pray this is another stone of victory for someone who needed to hear this. And thank you for just making a way for people to move towards and advance towards their victory.
Awesome. Thank you so much to Pastor Alicia. It was really great to sit down with her. Lots of great topics covered. Check in the show notes below for links to her masterclass/book launch, and her website and email and social media and all the great things so you can stay in contact and stay up to date on what she's doing. And as always, feel free to share this podcast with your friends, your family. You can find us on all your favorite podcast platforms: Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Pandora, Audible, you name it, we're there. And if you can't find us, please send us a note via email at monique@thevictorypodcast.com. So check out our website at thevictorypodcast.com. That's TheVictory podcast.com. There you can find this episode and other episodes. You can also check out our merch page as a way to support, or also become a part of our Patreon. In this episode, as I do every episode, every problem has a solution. It's whether you're willing to do the work to find it. Let's do the work and be victorious.